Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Let's cue the intro. This is the #1 podcast to learn marketing strategies for your board game. Whether you're just starting on your first game or an experienced designer, you've come to the right place. My name is Nalin, and let's talk marketing for your game. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. In this podcast, I interview creators who have successfully funded their ideas on Kickstarter to learn more about their journey to launch and help you formulate your own plan. I also bring on experts in the tabletop space to talk about all the facets of marketing and building your game publishing company. If you've been listening for a while now, you know that I hold nothing back. So in these episodes, be prepared to hear me ask the hard questions and really get down to the finer details. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Today, we're so lucky to have Dina on the show, and I'm excited for everything that we're going to be talking about today. So, Dina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, tell us more about yourself and, what you do in this world of marketing.
Yeah, so I am a community marketing specialist. I've done community management and also social media management and worked with marketing in terms of building communities for various companies.
Got it. Well, this is a huge topic, and a lot of people just are so boggled by building community. So I'd love it if you could kind of talk to us, a little bit in depth about what kind of channels should people be thinking about when they start building communities?
So first of all, I think it's really important to think about what people do on the specific channels, because not every channel is going to be right for whatever venture you're doing. For example, on TikTok, it's a lot about sharing really short videos. It's about, being real and humble, and, human interaction is really important there. So if you were, for example, using TikTok as a community building site, you'd have to show the real human side of things. For as example, if you're using Instagram for community, it's more about sharing stories. It's about engaging in storytelling and in a way give value to people in a heart-to-heart way, so that you give them something to relate to. And each different platform has these kind of rules for how to communicate already there. So it's just a matter of looking at the channels and what is already existing and what is the norm, and then taking that and find how you can use this for your own venture and in your own adventure.
Got it. So when it comes to, you mentioned that each community and each platform has their own norms. What's the best way to kind of understand each of the norms and really just understand how you yourself should be creating content for those platforms?
So what I always start with doing is infiltrate the existing communities and create yourself a space there. So for me, when I've been working with board game, it's about joining all the communities and the groups that are already on, for example, Facebook, or joining in on particular hashtag trends that are on Instagram, or even on Twitter. There will be, viral events and also hashtag events that will happen. So it's a part of, you have to join into them and see how people are interacting and what sort of content they are sharing on the particular hashtags, and kind of note it down for yourself and write it down, and just see how you can use these and see if there's any patterns to these events and the happenings that are going on, and what platforms, what happens when.
That's really cool. Hashtag events and community events. How do you find out about them?
So for me, it really is just keeping an eye out on what people are doing. So there's always key influencers, that we call it in marketing. But a key influencer is a person who are the ones who either start these events, or the ones who are really quick at picking them up, or are already in a group of people who where one or several of them are key influencers. So if you can't find a key influencer, you can always find the ones who are, heavily influenced in their marketing of themselves, that are following them. So you can quite, by just looking and being part and keeping your eyes out, you can identify exactly like the people who are the movers within the communities, and then befriend them, be a part of, leave a comment, start a conversation, just DM them in their inbox and saying, I thought this was really cool. Is there a particular group where you schedule these kind of events? I see there's a lot of people doing it. Just ask questions, because a lot of these people are so open, and they will just, invite you into, if it is a Discord group or if it's a Facebook group, they will invite you. And because obviously the more the merrier in these kind of events. So it's just not being afraid and just, reach out.
Got it. So you presented a lot of really like actionable things to do, like commenting on these influencers' posts, or like sending them a DM, like making conversation with them, and just starting that like one-on-one interaction, pretty much.
Yeah.
I love the way we're going with this. Like, what kind of other things for different channels do you see people doing that are working, and what should people kind of stay away from?
So what do people do that are working on, for example, Twitter? I love Twitter when it comes to board gaming community making. Mostly it's because a lot of game designers are already on Twitter, and they're using Twitter very actively as a way of filling out the empty space of their day. They don't really think of it as community building, but slowly every single day you see that what they are actually doing there is community building. They are finding other game designers that they are chatting about. They are talking directly to people who are making videos, like content creators of various types, every single day there. So what they're doing there is a lot of this community building. And a lot of the trends that we see happening into Instagram actually starts, like the fire and the ignite of the inspiration comes from Twitter engagement. So if you want to be like really in front and create some of these trends, being on Twitter is really important, I think.
Got it.
Also catching people there is so much easier, because there's such a friendly community in terms of like the board gaming space, that everyone wants to help. And I absolutely love that. And in terms of what we shouldn't do is, don't talk only about your product, only about what you can do and what you are doing. Actually be genuinely interested in what other people have to say. Give other people space. In marketing, we have the golden rule of 20/80s, is that 20% should be self-promotional and 80% should be benefiting others or enriching the community.
That's really cool. There's, again, the 20/80 rule is a really key part of, like, again, what not to do, right? Like, make sure you're promoting your community and then helping everyone in the community too, not just talking about your own thing. I really love that. Just to go back a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, in community marketing, one of the important things that you're doing is basically just pay it forward. To have that as like your main goal, and to give value and to pay forward always, so that if your post isn't doing one of those two things, you probably it doesn't fit under the community marketing point of view.
Paying it forward, that's a really good kind of key thing to think about when you're writing your posts. Like, who are you kind of impacting? How are you helping impact other people's lives too, in a way?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to go back one step here, because just to be honest here, like, I'm not a good, Twitterer. I don't even know what the word is. Twitterer, but
to tweet.
To tweet, right? Like, how do you start engaging on Twitter? Like, how often should you be talking, chatting? What kind of hashtags should you be like looking up? Like, what is it like in the board game world for Twitter?
Yeah. For me, I was thinking the same thing, like, is there even people who do board games on Twitter? So many people ask me that now, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably where you'll find the most of them. But to begin with, I also held the same sort of like, oh, I don't know, Twitter, is that really a thing? But absolutely. Once I joined and I just dived right into it, which was actually during one of my projects where we did it, and was like, yeah, well, we might as well try Twitter. We had some extra time, so we were like, why not? And what I found there was like so much more than what we were expecting. And we ended up actually changing to most of our time was spent on the Twitter engagement for the community side of it. And in terms of hashtags, Twitter is extremely dynamic. It changes from hour to hour. And there are great tools that will tell you like what are trending within hashtags. But obviously, since we're working with a niche here and we're working very specific on board games, there are obviously the really large hashtags that you also will be using on Facebook, like hashtag board games or board game nights. These are really big hashtags. Also, like if you look at the numbers on Instagram, it's the tags that has 500,000 and up in terms of usage. Those are the same tags that you would probably be using on Twitter. But obviously with Twitter, you're ending up using maybe 1 to max 3 tags for each post that are the most accurate, because if the algorithm is supposed to give you anything of a boost on Twitter, it has to be accurate. It has to be relevant for the tags. It isn't like on Instagram where you can throw in a tag that is outside of what you're actually doing, but it is within your targeted area where that is okay. On Twitter, it has to be on point all the time. So you can't just throw in a hashtag for the sake of the hashtag. And I think that's really good, because it means that the things that you find on Twitter under the specific hashtags are going to be relevant. And that makes Twitter for board game marketing extremely valuable, because you find exactly what you're expecting to find, and you can find the people you're expecting to find by just really cleverly using, max 5 hashtags in all of your marketing during an entire week. So in terms of how much you want to use Twitter, they say that the golden rule is that for each post you do on Instagram or Facebook, you probably want to do 5 on Twitter. And by 5, we're not really talking about like, these are top level posts, but you can do a lot of like chucking in extra small tidbits and thoughts around your content, but also just a reshare is one of those 5. So if someone is writing something that is relevant to what you're kind of the space that you're creating on your feed on Twitter, you can repost that or retweet it, which would to be using the correct lingo. And that will be counting of one of your 5. So it isn't as much work as it seems to when people are starting to do Twitter, because you see that the golden rule is to do 5 a day. That seems like a lot, but it is, you reading something interesting of an article and sharing it with others because others also might find that interesting. So you're providing value. That's post number 1. You're giving an update about what you're working on your project. Post number 2, if you are working on your product that day. Or even it could be you have a thought around something that is happening within your own adventure. Maybe you had a really good play testing. That is a post in itself. And all these little things shows the human side of your journey, as well as it's giving other people value, because they get to see how your journey is going and also what they can do. So maybe you are doing a play test and others will be like, oh yeah, I should probably be better at doing my play testing. And then it gets a ball going quite easily for creating conversations. And for Twitter, there's mainly like 2 times for when you'll see like the peaks of activity. Early in the morning for us here in the EU, and late at night. So it works really nicely for me because I get up in like the 7 a.m. finish time, and that is I get from 7 a.m. finish time to like 9. I get a lot of engagement there. And then from 9 onwards, it kind of dies down. And then again, 12 hours later, it has another peak. So it's really nice because if you can get those two and you can get a tweet in, you're good to go.
Wow. Okay. Those are a lot of, again, really, really actionable things, and which kind of leads me to the next question here. The launch process for a game is really quite long, right? There's a pre-launch phase, there's the campaign phase, there's stuff you do after the campaign too. How do the strategies that you were talking about here, how do they kind of differ throughout the different stages, or do they not even differ and you should be doing the exact same types of things throughout?
So during your 90-day pre-launch period on Facebook and Instagram, you would be most likely doing daily posts and updates all the time because you need to keep the audience engaged. And I've found that people who gear up some of their tweets to kind of vent out some of the frustrations onto Twitter during these 90 days actually sees an effect on how their engagement goes for Instagram and Facebook. So they drag people with them. So the ones who have geared up on Twitter during the period, mostly to just vent or have a free space, to not think about the marketing, has had a positive effect on the engagement that has happened on Instagram and Facebook. And also LinkedIn has also had an uptick because people see that what they're doing and that they're really struggling with it, or that they are giving it all they have. And people want to be a part of it because they love the passion, they love your dedication. And when people on Twitter sees that, they are more likely than people who see the same kind of passion on, say, Facebook or Instagram or the other channels. They are more likely to go across the channels to help you achieve exactly that. So I think that's really a cool thing that people can actually start doing more, is to gear up a little bit on their posting, but not necessarily as just a marketing type, but more as a community marketing, because it has a positive effect on the marketing side of things and how they do on the other social platforms.
Got it.
And otherwise, post campaign, a lot of people will start going down and doing maybe 2 or 3 posts a week because there's a lot of hard work that happens in the post-launch period. And that seems to work pretty well across all the different channels, if that's kind of okay. People aren't expecting a daily updates anymore. And it kind of slowly ebbs out. So you go down probably to like 3 posts a week on Instagram and on Facebook. And if there's anything new, you'd probably also do an update into your Kickstarter, which I see a lot of people forget to do. And I think it's really sad because they are losing out on, important and valuable information to their already existing backers, which can help them if they're doing a launch of, a second launch of another game later. Not updating their Kickstarter page can also, have an effect. So to, people who are listening, don't forget to also do that. Obviously pre-campaign, the 90 days, way in the beginning, it really depends what channel is going to be best for you, depending on how you approach marketing. Like, are you getting people who actually do marketing or social media management, or is it a small team, or is it a larger team who are doing these things? Because you also want to prepare for whoever is taking over. Like, some people get, a marketing company to take over for the entire 90 days. So you want there to be a sort of a consistency in the phasing of letting others take over, and also make it clear to your audience that whoever is taking over, that is going to happen. So there's not one voice that suddenly changes. So there has to be, a sort of a planning involved there.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, how, to make things seamless and also to kind of keep things kind of interactive and engaging for people throughout, even before that 90-day period, during the 90-day period, and again, beyond that 90-day period pre-launch too. So this leads me
Yeah.
kind of to the next question here too, of like, a lot of people ask, right? Like, okay, I'm posting all these things on social media. I'm posting like artwork. I'm posting about my play testing. I'm posting about all these different things. How do I get people to take action? Like, what's that final step to either, get someone on an email list, get someone to visit a Kickstarter page? What's that final step?
That's a brilliant question. Absolutely. And obviously, your main goal during this pre-launch period, no matter where in the pre-launch period, especially in the 90 days, is going to be to get, sign-ups or people to hit the like button on Kickstarter page or Indiegogo so they can follow your campaign. Or even like likes and follows are pretty good too. And obviously on Instagram, the algorithms are changing rapidly all the time so that there's always something new. Like right now, Instagram is favoring posts that have saves over likes. And those are things that you can plan into your like social media stretch goals. Like I see some people really like those. So those are things that you can help in order to drive the engagement. But when we're looking at audience, 10% of your audience that you are targeting is going to be the kind of people who are wanting to communicate with you, who are right at the bat going to want to leave a comment or drop a like. 10%. Without those 10%, if you don't get the first comments in, they're not going to activate the next 20%. 20% of your audience is going to be willing to communicate with you during your campaign as in forms of comments if you have already have some comments. They don't want to be the first. On YouTube, you always have these, oh, I was the first to comment. Those are your 10%ers. By activating those, you get the next 20. What I always find is a really good trick to do when it comes to gaining engagement on especially Instagram is whenever you see someone who is liking your post for the first time, drop them a message saying, hey, I saw you liked my post. This is what we're doing. Here's a link to the sign up form if you want to have it. If you have any questions, you can see it here. And just like start the conversation, because they are not going to want to start the conversation with you unless you approach them or someone has already approached them. And they probably stumbled upon your post and was scrolling through, because Instagram has like 90 minutes a day is how people usually use Instagram. And it can be so easy to just scroll through and look at the picture and be like, hey, that's a really cool picture. I like that. And then you forget it. You don't automatically link the image with the brand. So in order to drive that brand through that kind of fog of absent-mindedly scrolling is to send them a message. And I see this work a lot of times. Sometimes you'll not have any response, and then you can just leave it. Go to their page when you have a like from someone new, or whenever someone really likes one of your posts. Go to their page, leave a comment. They're going to want to give something back. So by providing them value, by leaving them a comment, they're going to want to leave you a comment next time. So trade, in a sense, a like for a like and a comment for a comment in the early days can really help boost your stats for how many people get to see you, as well as getting more people to comment to you.
Wow. Yeah, no, those are a lot of like really, really key tactics to use here. Firstly, to like actually talk to people, be proactive in talking to people in that one-on-one conversation, but also using that kind of like for like, comment for comment kind of tactic to, as you're growing when you're small, to get that exposure too, and that kind of like relationship building.
Absolutely.
In these kind of like early stages of growing a social following, right? Is there kind of like a tipping point where things kind of snowball, or is it just kind of hard work throughout? Like what is that kind of like to grow to like 10,000 people, 100,000 people and beyond?
So the first 300 are going to be hard unless you're inviting your friends. They said that if you have a really good friend base, you can get to the first 300 quite easily. So if you're like super social person, is a game designer, has a new game, invites all his friends, has 300. Okay, that one is easy. The next 300 that is like you don't know them. The 300 that you don't know is really hard to get. After that, it kind of grows on itself a little bit. Then it comes to the 1,000. Once you get to 1,000, getting up to like the next bracket there, which is like 1.5 to 2,000, can be really challenging because then you're starting to compete against larger content creators, and you want to kind of get to be able to push through that. So gaining those from the 1,000 and up can kind of be slow for some. You can kind of flatline, it's like the dead week of your Kickstarter, week 3. After 1,000, a lot of people will hit that. And that's when you just gotta give a lot of extra into it. And from there on, you get to that 2K. That's when it starts snowballing on its own.
Oh, wow. Okay. So like for people building something from scratch, looking towards like a 2K mark and just really hustling to get there is kind of an initial goal then.
Yeah.
Got it. And
the first K is really like, you want to set the first goal to like getting to the first K, the 1,000. After that, when you get just above it, that's when it's going to just roll on its own for a bit. And then you're going to hit another one, and you're going to notice that you've hit the next bracket. And for some, that is like on around 5,000 followers. Some people don't really hit it until 10, but at some point you will hit the next, where you kind of have to add in a little bit of extra work again to get it to roll.
Got it. Okay. And I guess this also brings me to a question about algorithms, right? A lot of people talk about, social media algorithms, like Facebook algorithms, Instagram algorithms. What are these algorithms, and what do they matter?
Yeah, I did, I think it was last month or maybe even the month before that, I did a whole 2-hour long talk on a Twitch stream just talking about how the different algorithms work and how the algorithm is like boosting certain posts but not others. And what it really boils down to is, if we'll start with Instagram. So the Instagram is always going to prefer natively posted posts. So say you're doing a post through a social media management system, and you are posting that same picture with the same text to Facebook and to Instagram, Instagram is not going to like that, and will automatically at that point kind of demote your post, because those two platforms are not the same. So if you're using the same image on several platforms, especially within the Facebook network, so Instagram and Facebook, is that you want to have different text to it, because obviously different platforms, different people, we're catering to slightly different modes of usage for the audience. So that's like the first thing. You want to cater your image as well as your text based on the platform you're posting it to. So slightly different variations of each other so that they're not copy-paste of each other.
Before we go on to the next thing, what types of images kind of work best on like Twitter versus Instagram, for example, and what kind of text works best for these two platforms, just as an example?
Okay, so for Instagram, you want to go for storytelling. You want to be engaging. You want it to be as a little trip through, a history that you're telling someone. Usually the longer texts are doing really good at Instagram at the moment, because people want to kind of dream away a little and have an escapism. Instagram is great for that. On Facebook, you want the text to be a little bit shorter, fit within the attention span of like 15 seconds. If it also comes with an image, well, as on Twitter, you can do linked tweets, because you are limited by how many numbers of letters you can use on a tweet. So keep it short, but also keep it, be sure to get that call of action into Twitter. and also on Facebook, and get them kind of early in. While as on Instagram, you can actually leave the call to action further down or even in the middle of your story, as long as you're highlighting that like this is the call to action with like an emoji. So yeah, and as for images, you want to use, depends if you're showing the game, you want to have like aesthetically pleasing images that are, for games, it seems to be the 45-degree angle tilt onto the game board are really popular, and also like the above down views of the games seems to be really popular at the moment.
Got it.
But it really depends on what you're working on. Like some are obviously, as we were saying earlier, they are sharing game art, and in that case, be sure to tag the artist in like at Facebook, Twitter, like if they are on Twitter, tag them straight away. In Instagram, leave a link back whenever you're posting artists, because people really love that. It is all about, pay it forward. They did the job for you, link back is like basic level.
Absolutely. Okay, so we went into a little bit of detail here about the types of images and types of text that work for these different platforms. But going back to the algorithms, the first thing was, again, making sure the content you put out just is appropriate for each of the platforms.
Yes. And that your call of action is engaging. Obviously, that is in order to activate your audience. But for the algorithm, they don't really care about what is within the text. Twitter will care more what's within the text because it's so short and it needs to be relevant, because they actually look for relevance more than Facebook and Instagram does. As an example, TikTok doesn't look at relevance at all. That is entirely user-based, while as LinkedIn does also look into relevance on tags used. So that's something to keep in mind. It also looks in all of these platforms will look at your frequency of posting. Is there a consistency of posting? Instagram and Facebook are both really harsh when it comes to consistency. They prefer it in terms of the algorithm that you're posting at a particular time. So if there is a 2-hour window where you will do most of your activity in terms of posting, Instagram and then Facebook, the Facebook network really likes that. Twitter doesn't really care when you're posting, but the hashtags that you're using will care at what times they're being used, because obviously when are other people using the same hashtags in order to give you more views.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot there. It's, hearing all you talk about all the ways to even just activate this part of this part of social media, right? The algorithm. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot to even think about what hashtags work at what time, what types of images for each one. How, for a game designer, right? Coming into the first time game designer, how do you recommend people just making it work, right? As well as, play testing, developing the game, like doing everything else too. Like, how does social fit into the big picture here?
Yeah. You have to kind of be interested in learning a little bit. Even the bare basics of how all these things work will do great for you, as long as you're willing to, put in just that little bit of extra time to understand just the bare minimum, because sometimes you can make do on the minimal. It will give you some more than nothing. If you're not really interested and you're just cross-posting all your images with the same tags and everything, the algorithm is going to think you're spam, and then it's not really being shown to anyone. So you have to give it at least the bare minimum. So, for the first timer, I wouldn't probably not recommend sitting down and doing hashtag research and really, write down 300-400 hashtags, because that can be daunting if you're not really knowing what you're looking for. But to spend maybe 10 hours to just do the research to figure out like what content goes on what and what does each platform require, and then taking a choice as to what platforms fits with your time limitations and your budget, and just do those.
Got it. Okay, so we talked a lot about Twitter today, right? We talked a lot about how Twitter is really great for game designers and people, and just the board game world in general. What other platforms do you recommend? There's a lot, right? There's TikTok, there's Pinterest, there's all these other things too. What do you kind of recommend people really taking a look at and seeing if it's right for them or not?
Okay, so right now, the biggest ones for board games where you will get the most out of it is kind of like the Facebook network, Twitter, and TikTok. TikTok is great if your targeted audience is, say, millennials or 30 plus, up to like 40 plus. Like if you're targeted in a way there, that would be great. If you are a part of that or even older, I've seen some content creators who are like in their 50s who are just absolutely killing it at TikTok. So, you know, this is kind of like the new platform at the moment, where a lot of people are just trying a lot of new things, but you have to be kind of goofy and just relaxed with it if you're going to jump into TikTok. Otherwise, you know, stick with Twitter, which is brilliant for intellectuals and creating that intellectual conversations and stimuli, or, you know, do the basics of the Facebook and Instagram. I would definitely recommend people who aren't on Instagram to get on there, because the scene there is so vibrant and there's a lot of really cool content creators and a lot of things happening on Instagram.
Got it. No, that's really good recommendations for all these platforms here. And when someone's new here, the last really big question I wanted to ask, when someone's new to social and someone's like trying to figure out again which platform, like how many engagement posts and things like that they have to look at, what kind of goals should they be setting for themselves?
So you have to think about like, what is success, and what does success mean to you on said platform? For some people, success is going to be X amount of number of likes or X amount of number of follows. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for conversation, you know, your goal should be so and so many comments, and everything you do should be working towards striving to get those comments and to create the conversations. And if you're just brand new and all you're wanting to do is to, you know, get your game funded, then obviously your goal is going to be how many signups are you getting into your signup forms. So that would be on Instagram, that will be web clicks that you would be getting from there. For people who are just new and getting into this and just doing this for a particular Kickstarter and not really thinking beyond that, you would probably start before your 90-day period, have your account up and start posting a little by little and get familiar and acquainted with the platforms. And at that point, you would be looking at getting more likes, because the more and follows. So you'd be starting to gather some follows before the 90 days. And once the 90 days, you would change your goal to being to get them to sign up.
Got it. Okay. There's again, lots to think about here. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about all this, everything social, right? Like kind of what channels to look at, algorithm is. And I know that you actually help people do this too, right? You help people figure out their social. Like, I'd love it if you could talk to us more about what you do and also how people can reach out to you to you know, get in touch.
Yeah. So I do a little bit of a variation because I come from a game designer's background myself. I have worked with code designing and also written a couple of TTRPGs myself. So I started into this kind of like doing playtesting and alpha testing to help others get their game out there. That was what I started with. And then on the side, I started doing a full-time work with marketing. And I figured I can actually use the skills that I've learned from doing playtesting from all these years. It's now 17 years and counting, so I'll be getting up to my 20th years of playtesting soon, so that would be really awesome. So I figured a way that I could use marketing skills to use that into the playtesting and just like help people make their games better in terms of making them marketable, and also point out what parts of their already existing games were really marketable and how they could market the games that they had. And that gave a lot of game designers a little bit of a heads up. They didn't think that that's how you could market a game, and they gave them a little bit of a new way to see their own games. And I realized that, you know, not that many people do this. There aren't that many marketers or social media managers in the board gaming space. So I decided to, you know, kind of carve a little space for myself, and I volunteered a lot of my own time into helping game designers prepare for their Kickstarters. And then now I've done, I'm just now on my 10th project for Kickstarter that I've done so far this year, which has been really exciting to help them get geared up for launch, be it, you know, just giving them the basic tips of how to improve on their social media, or sitting down to just do the hashtag research for them and giving them a rotation system for their hashtags, because that is a big job that you kind of have to make time for if you're going to do it big. It has been to give feedback on their websites, or even helping them just tune a few things here and there. Or for some, I've taken over control entirely and just done all the social media management and community build for their entire Kickstarter.
Got it. And how do people, if they want to work with you and want to like pick your brain and just talk to you, how do people get in touch?
Mainly through Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I get a lot of people just DMing me questions. As I said, I do a couple of Twitch streams. I've had some people come to me after the streams that I do, where I talk about marketing and I give game designers tips on how to improve on them. And I also explain, you know, these concepts that might be new to people, like explaining the algorithms. And I sit down and I just think for myself, like, if I was new to this, how would I explain it? And then I go out there and I spend some time and I try to make it work for others. So it's accessible knowledge, because I don't feel like gatekeeping marketing is going to benefit anyone. So I just love being able to give back to the community and see this space grow. And it's so enriching, and I just absolutely love it, because when I'm doing this, others are going to jump in and learn something too, or they're going to come up with questions, or they might even help me with something else.
I love it. Such a great ending to this. I'll be sure to link to that Twitch stream that you're talking about too in the show notes of this, so that people can go and have a listen to you talk in more depth about that too.
Yeah, and I also made on my Twitter, there's a thread there where you can find all of them, and we're also like specifically what we're talking about in each of them.
Okay. What's your Twitter handle?
On Twitter, I am Dina Said So 1. On Instagram, I am the Gamer Valkyrie. And on Facebook, you'll just find me under my name, Dina. Perfect.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing all these insights about social media with us. This was enlightening for me too, as someone, again, exploring social media myself. So thank you so much for your time, Dina.
Happy to help anytime.
And that wraps up our episode today. If you found what we talked about today helpful in any way, please be sure to leave a review to help others find this podcast. And most importantly, if you're feeling that fire and you're ready to get started on your Kickstarter campaign, be sure to head to the show notes of the podcast. I've linked some of my resources that others have used to successfully launch and get funded. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. For daily tips and advice, find us in the Board Game Marketing group on Facebook. See you next week.